Before the 2012 season, I did my AFC North preview, and I said that the Steelers were going to finish third in that division, in my opinion, because I thought the Ravens were the best team, and I thought the Bengals had done enough over the past couple of drafts to improve themselves, where they were just now a better football team than the Pittsburgh Steelers. And obviously, I was validated as correct in 2012 because the Pittsburgh Steelers did end up finishing third in the AFC North with an 8-8 record and are holders of the 17th overall pick in this upcoming April's NFL draft. When you look at the Steelers, over the course of close to the past decade or so, in large part, you could argue since 2004, really, but even going back to when Maddox had that great year in 2002, I guess. Over the past decade, the Steelers, by and large, have been in the picture most every year. They're a team to reckon with in some ways. One year, maybe they'll have a great year. The next year, they'll have a good year. The next year, a so-so year. Then they're right back. At least they are consistently not shitty. How about that? But there are some problems with this team. And 2012, I think, exposed them significantly. Let's look at the offensive side of the ball first. Ben got hurt in the middle to late portion of the season, and the team lost 2 out of 3 games. Then Ben comes back from injury, and you're like, oh, the Steelers are going to make a late run, and then they'll make the playoffs. No, when he came back, they lost 3 out of 4. It wasn't good. He wasn't particularly sharp. A guy that's known as a big moment, big play quarterback who plays well in big games, actually struggled and made some poor throws and some bad decisions in those big moments. This was also a team with an identity of being a power running team. It really truly lacked a consistent running game. You figure with Mendenhall having the knee injury, he was basically a non-factor all year. And then you had the platoon of running backs like Redmond and Jonathan Dwyer. They maybe had an occasional game or two where they were okay, but in general, they really lacked a consistent running game. And their wide receivers, to me, were kind of so-so. Wallace wasn't as good in 2012 as he had been in 2011 or 2010. I like guys like Antonio Brown and Emmanuel Sanders, but they weren't great weapons for Big Ben or his backups to throw to this past season. Defensively, there were some holes. They really struggled to generate a consistent pass rush. They still have guys that can do it. But you look at a guy like James Harrison, 35 years old. How much longer does he really have? Is he even going to be back in 2013? And this is a team that really didn't get a whole lot of the front three, so it's not hard to figure out why they struggled at times to generate a consistent pass rush. I think their secondary has been a big problem for a number of years, and in part, the reason they've been able to get away with some of their deficiencies, in particular at cornerback, is because of the play over the years of Troy Polamalu. I don't think Polamalu is the same player that he used to be. Injuries and age maybe are starting to take a toll a little bit, and as a result, at times, they were very suspect in coverage, and they also didn't create a lot of turnovers, which helps compensate maybe for some of your weaknesses on defense, especially in the secondary. The bottom line is in 2012, when you look back at this team and their season, this is a team that has 2 identities as an organization or as a football team. On offense, they are still, even though it's Big Ben's team and they like to throw the ball more, they're still a team that's built on power running. And they didn't power run very well in 2012. On defense, they're built on being a fast, aggressive, playmaking defense that confuses you with different looks, that creates a lot of pressure on opposing quarterbacks, that generates a lot of turnovers. And they didn't do that very well at all. And in general, this team just didn't play very well down the stretch. It's not hard to figure out why the Pittsburgh Steelers went 8-8 and finished third in their division this past season. It really isn't. And they've got some big questions coming up in the offseason. I've got the list here of some of the, some of the free agents, and some of these guys may not be back. It could only add to the number of holes that the Steelers are going to have to address in the draft and in the offseason. Cornerback Keenan Lewis, wide receiver Mike Wallace, running backs Richard Mendenhall and Jonathan Dwyer, wide receiver Emmanuel Sanders, longtime nose tackle Casey Hampton, inside linebacker Larry Foote. You could have James Harrison potentially be with age and his salary cap number. He could be a potential cap cut. Things could be very interesting in Pittsburgh right now. This is a team that is 8-8 and could go one or two ways. And if they're not careful and they don't get it right, they could be starting to trend the other way to the point where even the freaking Cleveland Browns pass them up in the short term, and the Steelers are the 4th man in a 3-man division. When you look at the Steelers over the past 5 years when it comes to the NFL draft, the first major glaring weakness to me is their inability and or lack of desire to effectively address the secondary, especially the cornerback position. I don't get it. That's been something that I think many Steelers fans have viewed for years as like the big weakness on defense. And for a team that still is a defense first organization, they just flat out seem to refuse and fail to want to address cornerback and even safety on the other side, next to Polamalu. I don't get it. And maybe, that's why they didn't play so well in 2012, you think. But there are other reasons for that, too. You look at the 2008 draft class. If Mendenhall isn't re-signed and he doesn't play better, the 2008 draft is pretty much a total loss for the Steelers already in 2000, going into 2013. Outside of Mike Wallace in 2009, they really didn't get anything good or special out of that draft class. And if they let Mike Wallace go via free agency, that's another year where you basically have nothing to show for that draft. Again, not hard to figure out why the Steelers are in the position that they're in. The 2010 draft class was very solid, though. Marquise Pouncey, Jason Worlds, Manuel Sanders, Antonio Brown, Jonathan Dwyer. They had some good picks in that draft. And then guys like Cameron Hayward. One thing they've failed to do in recent years is be able to, find really good 3-4 defensive linemen. They don't have a replacement in the wings, really, for Casey Hampton. Again, a nose tackle in his mid-30s. If he doesn't retire, even if they do resign him, how much more does he really have left in the tank? Ziggy Hood has been nothing special. And Cameron Hayward, child please. They've really struggled in the draft to find, contributors, and good contributors at that, both on the defensive line in that 3-4, which is very important, and in particular in the secondary. And like I said, this is a team with a lot of talent still in their 3-4 in terms of the linebacker position, but the guys in front of them and the guys behind them aren't all that good. So that kind of limits the impact that those great linebackers are going to have. It's no wonder they struggled to generate a pass rush in 2012. They struggled to make big plays on a consistent basis. They struggled to force a lot of turnovers. And it's something that's going to have to be addressed in this 2013 NFL draft. Now, I do think with last year's draft that it has the potential for some long-term payoff. And I've liked the fact that the Steelers have at least tried to address a major deficiency, the offensive line, the past couple drafts with Marcus Gilbert, and then last year with David DeCastro, a beast of a guard. You'll find that out, Steeler fans, in 2013, and then Mike Adams in the second round. So they could potentially long-term have some better protection for Big Ben with that offensive line and also be a better run-blocking unit, and, that's good. But you figure even with the potential for having some needs on the offensive side of the football, that this upcoming draft is by and large going to be about rebuilding and retooling that defense. And it, quite frankly, has to be. Because that is the ultimate identity of the Steelers team, the Steelers organization. And if you can't do well at what your identity is, you're not going to be a very good football team. And that's the bottom line. So I look at this draft to be an example of they have needs on their 3-man defensive line. They have needs in their 4-man linebacking core. Maybe that aren't as prevalent as the needs on the line or in particular in the secondary. But they're probably going to take with the Steelers a best player available on the defensive side of the ball approach. And there's nothing wrong with that. You look at the first round. Who could they potentially be drafting? They could say, Jay Saracen, goodbye. We need somebody else on the other side of Lamar Woodley, and we don't think Worlds is going to be the guy. They could see a guy like if a Jarvis Jones somehow dropped to them at 17, or a Barkevius Mingo or Deion Jordan's there. You could see them take a 3-4 outside rusher. That's very possible. I mean, this is a team that's taken linebackers in the past when it didn't seem like it was a great big need, but that's why it's been such a position of strength for so long, is they always seem to be able to reload and retool at that position because they address that position in the draft. Think Lawrence Timmons and Lamar Woodley, for example. They could be taking a defensive lineman. They could look at John Jenkins and say, that's the nose tackle we need. You could sit there and see a guy like Jonathan Hankins, and they may draft and say, we need him to play end in the 3-4. Potentially, if the shit that's happened with him and his fake girlfriend hasn't hurt him too damn much, and the national title game performance didn't hurt him too much, you could see Monte Teo go here at 17 and be viewed as a long-term replacement for Larry Foote on the inside of that 3-4. They could decide that safety's a need, and that's where they want to go, and that Vaccaro or Eric Reed or whoever is the best player available on the defensive side, and helping out Polamalu in the back end of that secondary, and or potentially being the long-term replacement for said Troy Polamalu. I think ultimately that cornerback needs to be the position that's addressed in the first round, whether that be Xavier Rhodes from Florida State or a guy that is probably going to really improve his draft stock over the next couple of months, just like he did at the Senior Bowl, Desmond Trufant. The bottom line is the Steelers have to address the defense. And in particular, for many years, they have really failed to effectively address the secondary. Now, the Steelers kind of have this approach in the draft. They sit put, especially in the first round. They let the board kind of fall out as they may, and they look at the best player available wherever they're trying to address position of need, and that's what they take. And it seems to work out for them. And that could very well be what happens here in 2013. But I think the emphasis has to be on the defensive side of the football. And first and foremost, the emphasis has to be in that secondary. To me, if I look at the Steelers, to me, 2 of their first 3 picks have to be corners. Or if you want to say a corner and a safety, fine. But 2 of their first 3 picks have to be secondary players. Somewhere in there, I would expect them to either address nose tackle or inside or outside linebacker to help really improve the long-term prospects of that 3-4 defense that Dick LeBeau and Mike Tomlin really love to run. If they do that, then 2013 you could see some slight improvements for the Steelers. But if they don't, like I said before, they could potentially start to regress a little bit, get a bit older, lose talent, and be a team that's the 4th team in a 3-man division in the AFC North.